Today we are here to focus on specific players, and one of those we got to see for the first time today was Trayce Jackson-Davis. If you're a Warrior fan, I don't think you could have asked for much more from TJD, to be honest, in his debut. 14 points, 7 rebounds, an assist, a block shot, a couple of turnovers. Look, a little bit rusty early, but I think all in all, an exciting performance from the 57th overall pick. A couple of takeaways from Trayce Jackson-Davis today. He's 6'9", obviously. He's been kind of linked as a power forward / centre coming into the NBA. I think we can shelve the idea of him being a power forward, especially in a Steve Kerr-led Warriors system. I don't think that's a position he'll be playing whatsoever. Because with his size, he's 6'9", he plays big. He plays at that size, if not bigger. It's almost like a Kevon Looney situation where we saw Loon have rebound after rebound, 20 rebounds in Game 7 against the Sacramento Kings in that first round series. And I often have to remind some of my mates that, hey, Kevon Looney's only 6'9". He plays like he's a 7-footer, but he's only 6'9". And I think you get 6'9" guys who are lean, who are a little bit more athletic maybe, who are 3-4s rather than centers. But Trayce Jackson-Davis is not one of those guys. He's a genuine 6'9", big body, nice frame, good athleticism still though. And I don't think we'll be seeing him play power forward at all. Actually, when I first saw him on the floor wearing that number 32 jersey, potentially made famous by Otto Porter Jr. most recently, but I actually got some flashbacks to a bit of Marquise Chris, and a lot of people might be saying, well, I hope we've got more in Trayce Jackson-Davis than what we did in Marquise Chris. I did think that Marquise Chris was a pretty solid player for the Warriors throughout his short stint. It was probably the best part of his career, best stint of his career was with the Warriors as opposed to any other team who, as a top 10 pick, let's be honest, he was a bust. But I think with that frame, with the size, kind of bigger build at 6'9" still, and with the kind of athleticism, the pick and roll attributes, the dunker spot, the finishing with the two-hand slam, and again, it might have just been more so wearing that 32 jersey of the Warriors. I did get some Marquise Chris flashbacks. That's not to say that Trayce Jackson-Davis can't be a better NBA player than Marquise Chris was. I think there's a bit more feel and passing to his game than Marquise Chris would have ever had, if I'm being honest. We know that's an element that Mike Dunleavy Jr. alluded to the other day in his press conference about the Warriors needing another big. He said, well, we don't just want a big guy for the sake of a big guy. We need them to be skilled. We need them to have a feel for the game. And I think that's what Trayce Jackson-Davis can provide. His very first play, very impressive, kind of darted from the perimeter inside, received the ball, drew 2 defenders, and found a cutting Guy Santos from the baseline. Very exciting. In fact, of all the things he did today, that might have been the best, and it was on the very first play, just in terms of being able to read the defense and find the cutter in that scenario, as opposed to these less skilled centers who can often go searching for their shot first and foremost, and especially in a situation like that for Trayce Jackson-Davis, who has been dealing with a hamstring injury, who is yet to play in Summer League until today. He would have been itching to get at it, and in that scenario, you might not have blamed him for potentially rushing things, for putting up a baby hook or something like that to try and get on the board points-wise. It was a really nice find to Guy Santos, and I think that shows an intriguing element that hopefully can move forward with the Warriors next season and in years to come. The rest of the game was more about his scoring elements. Obviously, 14 points, a number of two-hand slams. I thought the connection between him and Brandon Podziemski, who I'm going to speak about in a minute, was really nice and encouraging for Warrior fans. There are a lot of times where Podziemski was able to get into the paint, where Trayce Jackson-Davis was playing in the dunker spot, and Podziemski was able to find him for the two-hand slam. Bit rusty early on, missed a couple of layups that he really should have made. They were point-blank ones. But otherwise, a really encouraging performance from Trayce Jackson-Davis. It's going to be interesting to me because obviously that's his first game, but from what I take from that is that if you are looking at these two Warrior rookies in Podziemski and Jackson-Davis, and you're looking at who could make more of an impact straight away, I think it's actually Jackson-Davis. And that's a bit surprising to say, maybe the 57th overall pick late in the draft as opposed to a first-round pick just outside of the lottery. I'm not saying it from a perspective of Trayce Jackson-Davis is 23 years old compared to 20 in Podziemski. I'm actually just saying it from what the Warriors need next season, and their lack of size and their lack of front court options on the roster means that Jackson-Davis is going to have a lot more opportunity for minutes next season than what I envisage for Podziemski. And also looking at Podziemski's summer league so far, which we'll get into a second. But there is a really intriguing element here with Jackson-Davis as a potential pick and roll partner for Chris Paul. Now, I said on the podcast earlier in the week that I'm not sure about the Warriors trying to dive into two different offensive styles, one with Chris Paul on the floor and one with Chris Paul off the floor. I think there needs to be a meshing of the two. That may not necessarily be the case, though, because on their latest podcast, Anthony Slater mentioned how the Warriors are kind of embracing will be embracing more of a pick and roll style with Chris Paul there. And so if that's the case, then someone like Trayce Jackson-Davis, who is a very good pick and roll player, who can not only finish around the rim in pick and roll situations, but also, as I said before, has that kind of passing element to his game where he could, if defenses collapse, he could kick out to a shooter or find another cutter kind of thing. I think that's going to be very interesting, and I am super intrigued to see how Trayce Jackson-Davis could go. I know Slater in an article earlier in the week as well said, don't discount Jackson-Davis from potentially having a role with the Warriors next season. I don't think we'll be seeing him on a completely nightly basis, game to game, but I do think that we could see him at certain stints, especially if any of the other front court players, like a Draymond or a Loon or a Dario Saric, if any of those three guys get an injury, then all of a sudden there's not really many other options left, and Jackson-Davis might be thrown into the mix out of necessity more than anything. But I do think that he could thrive in a limited role next season for 10 minutes here or there every couple of games, where perhaps he plays with Chris Paul, maybe Saric is playing as the four, a couple other shooters out on the floor, and he could excel as just diving to the rim, playing in the dunker spot, whatever it is. I do think there is some exciting attributes that he could bring to the Warriors from as early as next season.